Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 26th of March 2025. We're going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can of course find those in the description to the video below. And we have a massive downtick across a number of these categories. Interestingly, drones as well is very low compared to what we have seen, which means that the Russians did release fewer drones over the last 2 nights. The cutoff is a bit weird, so it's not just last night, it's kind of half of last night and half of the night before. But it gives you an indication that it's been somewhat quieter, although there's some pretty heavy strikes last night on a few places. 1,280 personnel lost is about where we've seen it. 5 tanks is less, fewer tanks being lost. 15 troop carrying AFVs is below the daily average, still fairly significant. 17 artillery systems is massively down from what we have seen, but we have seen stupendously high numbers from the Ukrainians, even getting above 100. So to move back down to 17, yes, that's below the daily average, but it's still a significant number of pieces of artillery to have lost on the front line. But yeah, some people wondering whether that indicates that the Russians are running out, therefore, seeing such a big drop. I don't know that that would precipitate such an immediate drop, that they'd suddenly run out like that. So no, these things can be anomalous. 77 vehicles and fuel tanks is a fairly decent number. 1 piece of special equipment. I mean, goodness me, when I say it's a fairly decent number, you think, goodness me, 77 vehicles lost along the front line is a huge number of vehicles to have lost. But we've seen days where that has crept up to incredibly high. Well, it's been staying at very high numbers, well over 100 most days. So when it comes under 100, you're thinking, oh, that's low. But actually, that's still a huge number, right? Okay, so what are we going to look at now? These are M1978 Koksan. These are self-propelled artillery pieces. These are North Korean provided ones. Why I'm including this is that the imagery is coming from the Donbass, somewhere in Luhansk or Donetsk. That means the Russians are using North Korean materiel along the main part of the front line. Why is that significant? Because it almost certainly shows that they are running low, necessarily having to draft these in from, well, they were using these predominantly in the Kursk area, along with the North Koreans fighting up there. I wonder whether this means that you've got North Korean artillerymen fighting in Ukraine, or whether they're just using the equipment that's fairly standardized and the Russians can use that with some ease. I don't know. It'd be interesting if there are North Koreans inside Ukraine. That would cause quite some consternation. Okay, what do we have here? Well, some footage of a road, and I don't even know where, Donetsk direction, but, quote, they're burning terribly. The roads have become the front line. On the Donetsk direction, Russians continue to complain as their equipment keeps burning incessantly, says Wall Translated's Dmitry. As he said on the video, this one's even blocking the road, I think, to that one. Okay, we've seen imagery like this before, kind of roads of death and whatnot. This is a main road by the looks of it, possibly somewhat further from the front line, but still lots of destruction. Okay, why am I showing you this? It's kind of drawing things together with, very heavy losses of vehicles and fuel tanks on a daily basis. Then footage of roads showing quite a lot of carnage. And then we have a thread here, which is taking on board this video. Remember, I showed you a video of infantrymen bringing supplies, ammunition, and water and fuel by foot to the front line, and that's because they have no material in order to do that in certain cases. Chris Owicki does a thread on this. Russian vehicle logistics have virtually collapsed in frontline areas due to the constant threat of drones, forcing soldiers to walk tens of kilometers to obtain fuel, food, water, and medical supplies. A first-hand account gives an insight into the extreme danger they face. As previously reported, transporting supplies and evacuating the wounded is now largely done on foot, or famously by donkeys, in an area about 20 kilometers deep behind the front lines in Ukraine. Anything that moves is attacked by drones. This very much also includes men, who have to walk across open fields with no concealment or ability to evade attack drones. The Russians constantly take casualties just to keep their front line supplied. And that video that's being referenced there was a whole montage. I didn't show it to you, but there's a whole montage of people getting hit, like groups of people at night getting hit as they try and do the resupply at night or move wounded out at night because it's safer. Actually, there's a proliferation now of thermal camera drones. I mean, we did fundraising for Jigger's Paw for thermal, Mavic 3T drones, thermal imagery drones that can do a job of spotting targets at night. So, as war blogger Anatoly Radov puts it, quote, the guys tell me we have two 200s, those are dead, and 5 300s wounded, and this is one area, considering that this is daily, everyone marching to Lviv, personal F. I don't know how it will all end. So obviously a little bit down there. A frontline Russian soldier who runs a Groundhog Day Telegram channel describes a resupply trip that he undertook on the 22nd of March. Quotes, today it was my turn to go. After all sorts of things, we left, the three of us, at 11 in the morning, running with a plate of body armour hitting our chins painfully, with a rag hump dangling behind us, a knee-deep trench, and that was done. A sprint of 100 metres according to the map, and into a hole. We waited, listened, jumped on. 100 there, 100 there, phantom drones buzzing in our ears, and almost at the finish line, the drone turned out to be no phantom at all. I rolled under some burnt equipment. My partner pretended to be a bush. He got into the very heart of the thorns, the bastard. In other words, the drone hit that person. We sit waiting for a guide. Nobody knows where to go next, or maybe he did get into a thorny bush, I don't know. Nobody knows where to go next. About 15 minutes later, we joined a second group and sat down in cover. A very exciting activity, filling a backpack to the hum of rotary winged beast. We had fun for about 2 hours, running again in the first pair, and again a damned waiting drone, damn him. Using morale and willpower, I reach the trench, dive into it, and hide in the shelter to the disgusting screech of a kamikaze drone taking off about 50 meters away. They shared what they had brought without us. Of course, no one was left empty-handed, all of us. I don't quite know what that means at the end, but you get the point there that it is tough trying to get, and that's going to be the same for both sides to some degree, but the Ukrainians do have a drone advantage along the front line, so it's going to be worse for the Russians just resupplying their front lines. Having to do the last sections by foot means that it must be incredibly scary and very, very dangerous. Now, Turchny has done an analysis. There's an article that is somewhat summarized here that they've written up. Intercepting and neutralizing Russian reconnaissance and strike drones. The scope of the Ukrainian FPV drone interceptions has rapidly grown. Artem, who's the guy that wrote that new article, Artem's new article breaks down a detailed data set of these interceptions, providing insights into trends and technological advances. So Andrew Perpetua's map depicts both the researched interceptions and their scale. This article's data covers over 2,500 interceptions, illustrating both frontline activity and tactical trends. I mean, just look at that as far as huge amounts of pieces of information. By March 2025, 2,517 interceptions have been documented, with a fourfold increase in total interceptions since November 2024. Strike drones are harder to intercept, often flying lower and using radio silence, while reconnaissance drones comprise 20 times the number of strikes. In other words, you're going to more likely intercept larger, medium-range reconnaissance drones than take out individual FPV strike drones. I think that's what that tells you. So reconnaissance drones, when it comes to interceptions, are the most common successful interception. FPV interceptors, like those supplied by Come Back Alive and Serhiy Stenenko, are proving highly effective in countering enemy drones. They range from quadcopters to winged drones, offering speed, altitude, and maneuverability advantages with 160 kilometers an hour top speed and a 35 kilometer range. So these guys providing what look like they're bespoke interceptor drones. Automation could determine the future of FPV interceptor. Software advances to improve targeting, proximity explosion systems, increase speed, and enhance capabilities could potentially intercept long-range strike drones like Shahids and reduce Russian drone effectiveness. The FPV drone program is still evolving, with future developments focused on enhancing software, speed, and automation. As Ukraine fights for its existence, FPV drones remain a key defensive tool against enemy drones, with continued potential for innovation. And as I showed you, I think Yesterday, another montage of huge numbers of these, 89 it was, just in one video yesterday, of these mainly reconnaissance drones, but also things like Lancet drones. And that could come down to the strike drones there being the Lancet ones, rather than, I don't think the interceptor drones are really going to be taking out other FPV drones, but the strike drones are more likely to be Lancet loitering munitions. But yeah, so lots of potential there for innovation. And you can go and check out Artem's research in depth on Tochny, please do so. Okay, this is a piece in the Euromaidan Press, but it is basically taking the video, reporting from Ukraine's video, that's sort of waxing lyrical about F-16s. Ukraine's new F-16s are now ready to attack Russian jets and win. So this is an upbeat look at the increased usage of F-16s, possibly in the Kursk region, in particular, offering close air support to or at least striking targets in that area, doing a lot more ground attack than maybe the MiGs and airplanes that they are replacing. As this article, indeed the video, says, the ability to take down incoming threats is vital, given Russia's daily bombardment of Ukrainian cities and infrastructure with drones and missiles. While Ukraine has been defending itself using Soviet-era jets like the MiG-29 and Su-27, these aircraft were never designed for modern air combat or missile interception. The F-16, with its advanced radar systems and missile capabilities, is far more effective in this role. Since the start of the war, Ukraine has repeatedly emphasized the need for Western fighter jets to counter Russia's air power. Having more F-16s in its arsenal means that Ukraine can improve its operational flexibility in the skies, switching from purely defensive to offensive missions at a much higher pace with overall bigger efficiency and with less risk. With the continuous degrading of the Russian air defense network through a massive operation destroying hundreds of Russian launchers, radars and electronic warfare systems over the past months, which we have seen, the increased quantity of F-16 fighter jets gain the freedom to be used aggressively in offensive roles as well. They were recently involved in airstrikes on Russian military positions, infrastructure and headquarters in Kursk, dealing significant damage and sabotaging Russian efforts, working in tandem with Ukrainian MiGs. However, Western delivered jets have a clear edge over the Soviet-era aircraft. The F-16 can carry nearly twice the payload of the MiG-29 and has more hardpoints to mount munitions. They can also deploy advanced Western munitions without requiring complex and costly modifications. This makes them more effective at striking Russian bases, command centers, and logistics hubs deep behind the enemy lines, which we have seen, by the way. So, for example, we heard that a command post was taken out in Belgorod. And then a day later, we heard that General Lapin, one of the main commanders in the area, really high up, is missing, presumed dead type thing. And the rumours are that he was killed. Could well have been taken out by an F-16 strike on a Russian command post. So yeah, additionally, their greater operational range allows them to be rearmed and repaired at safer, more distant air bases, reducing the risk of Russian counterstrikes. I still thought the F-16s didn't have that much of a range, but anyway. Beyond striking ground targets, Ukraine's F-16s are also well equipped for air-to-air combat. They feature advanced radar systems, superior missile capabilities, and a relatively small radar cross-section compared to many Russian fighters, making them harder to detect and target. Recent footage of Ukrainian F-16 sortie, or the sorties, shows them carrying AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, external fuel tanks, and additional air-to-air sidewinders. So external fuel tanks will obviously give them greater range. This loadout suggests that these jets are on a mission to engage Russian aircraft rather than a ground attack mission, demonstrating Ukraine's growing ability to challenge enemy fighter jets. And that's kind of the point of the videos, is that it looks like they're being used more offensively, but also carrying a loadout that is designed to be able to take out Russian jets. I don't know whether I doubt they're going to be sent out to take out Russian jets, but if they come across them, then they need to defend themselves. But primarily they're going to be striking ground-based targets, I would have thought. Okay, just to finish off this section, yet again, and we saw 3 people taken out. Well, it was reported yesterday, but taken out recently, 3 TV journalists. A Russian state TV propagandist, Anna Prokofieva, from Russia 1, was killed in Belgorod region near Demidovka. Her car hit a mine. Others escaped, but she didn't. The cameraman was seriously injured. So, yeah, dangerous thing to do, reporting on the war, of course. But particularly on the Russian side, it seems at the moment. Right, going on to distant strikes, we have a much better interception rate for the Ukrainians against the Russian drones. That's good news there. 117 drones sent in, so it's still over 100, less than we have seen on previous days. 117, although the night before might have been fewer than that actually. Anyway, 56 taken out with conventional means and 48 suppressed by electronic warfare. That gives you 100 and so that's 90. That's 104. Still 13 actually. Still over 10 getting through. So 13 out of 117 is 10%. Is more than 10%, isn't it? So actually, that's not a great interception rate. Maybe I was thinking that made 114, but got my maths wrong. So yeah, still struggling then to get to the levels they were previously, sort of 95% plus. We're now looking at sort of 85% and often lower than that. So not great. Russian drones hit Zelensky's hometown in the most massive strike on the city since the war began. Ukrainian air defense intercepted a bunch of drones, but obviously, yeah, a bunch got through. Now, remember there was a negotiated agreement last night, a ceasefire on energy infrastructure. Lots of confusion about that. It seems that Ukraine didn't make strikes into Russia last night, although the Russians are claiming otherwise. And the Ukrainians were hit by Russian strikes on energy infrastructure. You know, places lost their electricity, lost their power. It was definitely the case that if there was a formal agreement in place, if the negotiated ceasefire was put in place yesterday, then Russia has already broken it. It broke it straight away. Now, there is lots of confusion as to exactly what was agreed upon yesterday and whether the Russians are putting further conditioning on the ceasefire, which the Americans are going to look at, 5 or 6 points on reducing sanctions on Russia, which would be absolutely terrible. But yeah, Kryvyi Rih was particularly hit. That's Zelensky's hometown. The headline away from the non-peace talks is an attack tonight on Kryvyi Rih. At least 15 explosions were heard as once again Russia swarmed a single city. The attack lasting over an hour. There were fires across the city, but no casualties reported, so that's good. Cherkasy was under attack as well. At least one explosion was reported there. Possibly air defense. There's no news of damage to the city or region so far, he said last night, Tim White. And then strikes on Sumy as well, and some evidence of this. And then numerous explosions reported in Cherkasy. Heavy attack continued there. In fact, the air attack warning has only just been switched off, he said many hours later. And then another video coming out from Kryvyi Rih. I showed this last night on the live stream, while also suffering numerous hits earlier in the night. So Kryvyi Rih really hit badly last night. What will be done about that? Will Russia be reprimanded? Will they be held to account for breaking the ceasefire? Was the ceasefire even properly in place? All of these questions, answers are difficult to come by. Now, first news story today, says Tim White again, reminds us that Trump and his team are either amateurs or out of their depth, or aiding Russia, or both. So what's this about, and what's this got to do with distant strikes? Well, President Zelensky's spokesman say there have been 8 attacks on the Ukrainian energy grid since Putin lied about shooting down their own drones to stop attacks. So if you remember, there was another kind of talk of ceasefire and whatnot, and at the time Putin had this conversation to Trump, there was then literally drones flying into Ukraine, hitting energy infrastructure. And then the rumor came out that, oh no, the Russians said that they shot down 8 of their own drones to stop them from striking. And that was even repeated by people high up in the American administration. Dmitry Litvin says Moscow is a city built on lies. No surprise to anyone in Ukraine. For example, in their statement after the meetings in Riyadh, the Russians claimed they believe a ceasefire on energy facilities has supposedly been in effect since March the 18th. Why March the 18th? Because that's when they pushed out a clearly fake story claiming Putin supposedly ordered a stop on 2 strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Now they just want to stay consistent in their lies and propaganda. But the reality is, since March the 18th, they've been hitting our energy sites with bombs, attack drones, and FPV drones. We're not going into all of the details, but there have already been 8 confirmed hits on energy facilities, and every night our air defense forces shoot down nearly 100 attack drones, and many of those drones are likely targeting other energy facilities. Without our defenders, there could have been many more hits. So yeah, the Russians are lying, even when the truth is obvious. It's just lying for the sake of lying. Sorry, that's why whatever they say or promise needs to be double checked, and that part is now on our partners. Yeah. But then Russia has come out and claimed this morning that Ukraine violated the truth by saying Russian MOD stated that Kyiv regime continued strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure despite Zelensky's statement on March the 24th. On the night of March the 26th, so last night, 2 Ukrainian drones were shot down near the coast of Crimea, with the target reportedly being ground equipment at the Hlebovka gas storage facility, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. Of course they're going to be saying that, right? So the Ukrainians no doubt trying to strike at an S-300 system or something, and then the Russians saying they're trying to blow up a gas system. And this is partly the problem with the whole ceasefire thing, that and I read you this from the Guardian article discussing the ceasefire agreements last night, is that, as Zelensky noted, these are self-policed. Like, if there are breaking of the ceasefire agreements, if there is a breakage, then it's up to either side to report that. So, when Russians do nothing but lie, then they are going to clearly do something like this. The ministry also claimed that Kyiv, by continuing to damage Russia's energy infrastructure, is doing everything possible to disrupt Russian-American agreements. Of course, it's all Kyiv's fault. Now, UK intelligence reported on this attack on Engels airbase, the one we said was a huge destruction of munitions, and it just went bang, didn't it? And we saw the satellite imagery afterwards, fairly good resolution satellite imagery, to show that there was quite a large amount of destruction to storage facilities at the base. The UK Defence Intelligence Update states the Ukrainian Armed Forces conducted an uncrewed aerial systems, that's a drone, attack on an ammunition storage area located in Russia's Engels 2 Strategic Aviation Airbase overnight on the 19th to 20th of March. Engels 2 is a military base used extensively for strike operations, approximately 600 kilometres from Ukraine's border. The area struck almost certainly stored a range of aerial munitions being used against Ukraine, causing significant damage. The substantial loss will likely disrupt strike operations from the airfield in the short term, forcing Russia to improve its defensive posture and replenish munitions stocks. Russian aircraft have also highly likely been dispersed to surrounding airfields, as has become standard practice in response to Ukrainian deep strike operations. So very likely here that the Ukrainians did a really significant amount of damage to the Russians and have potentially affected their missile attacks on Ukraine. The strike is Ukraine's most successful targeting of the Russian munitions depot in 2025 of a munitions depot this year so far, and continues a pattern of regular Ukrainian drone strikes deep into Russian territory. It also highlights the continuing struggles that stretched Russian air defense face in protecting its strategic military locations. And then we have a claim from yesterday. This is before the ceasefire agreements. This is during the daytime. An attack by a Ukrainian drone in the Krasnodar Krai resulted in the Rostov nuclear power plant disconnecting the high voltage line. The Tikorex number 2 ministry reports the gas storage facility in Crimea and the Svatovo gas distribution station in the LPR were also attacked, the department indicated. So before the agreement, there were some attacks on the energy infrastructure. Okay, now coming to other bits and pieces. We're going to start with something I meant to report the other day, but I lost the link and forgot about it. This is a fascinating little aside. Chris Owicki's done a thread on it, so let's chomp through this. So 2 Russian Black Widows, an army warrant officer and his wife, have been charged by the Russian authorities with recruiting vulnerable men into the army, contracting fake marriages, and seeking their deaths in order to obtain compensation payments to share between them. The Rakurs Angle Telegram channel has published details of the case brought by military investigators in the Primorsky Krai region of the Russian Far East against 4 people who are all linked with the 60th Motorized Rifle Brigade of the 5th Combined Arms Army. They are Alexander Sergeyevich Polishchuk, a warrant officer, crew member of the self-propelled artillery gun in the 60th MRB, Motorized Rifle Brigade, Daria Andreevna Polishchuk, entrepreneur, wife of Alexander Polishchuk, and Ksenia Andreevna Skribyabina, sergeant in the 60th MRB, and Natalia Vladimirovna Sudareva, accountant in the 60th MRB. Okay, so the 4 are charged with criminal fraud committed in the summer of 2024. According to the charges, the Polishchuks sought out disadvantaged individuals, leading a marginal lifestyle and having no close relatives. The conspirators are said to have worked to mislead them under various pretexts, with the aim of enlisting in military service under contract and entering into a fictitious marriage. Warrant Officer Polishchuk is said to have not only personally recruited the victims in the Khanka and Korol regions near the Chinese border, but also to have accompanied them to Ukraine with their documents to join the 60th Brigade there. On reaching the war zone, he got friends in his unit to assign the victims to assault units, which the indictment says ensures a high probability of their death during active combat operations with the enemy. Sergeant Skriabina, who worked in the 60th Brigade's personnel department, undertook a fictitious marriage with one of the victims for the purpose of subsequently receiving all of the above compensation payments in the event of his death. Natalia Sudareva worked in the 60th Brigade's financial department with responsibility for dispersing salaries and allowances. She also undertook a fictitious marriage to another victim on the pretense of delivering any death benefits to his daughter. The charging document alleges the conspirators agreed to split the death benefits 3 ways: a third to Skriabina, a third to Sudareva, and a third to the Polishchuks. Spouses of dead soldiers can expect to receive up to 14 million rubles in compensation. That's $158,000. So this is quite a substantial fee or amount. Their first victim was Vasily Gennadievich Vripitsky, who signed up in August 2024 at the persuasion of the Polishchuks. They convinced him that he could resolve his financial problems with an army salary and settled him in their home before accompanying him to Ukraine. Once he got there, the Polishchuks persuaded him to enter into a fictitious marriage with Skriabina for the sake of providing financial assistance to his mother, having first fraudulently deprived Vripitsky's mother of parental rights so that she would not receive payments. The Polishchuks then discovered that Vripitsky was entitled to housing from the state and convinced him to issue a power of attorney to Skriabina so that she could get a free apartment. They went back to Primorsky Krai to find more victims, but were rebuffed by a number of candidates before they found one, Sergei Ivanyuk, whose only relative was his brother. Like Vripitsky, he had financial problems as they managed to persuade him to sign an army contract. Under the subterfuge of providing financial assistance to his daughter, the Polishchuks persuaded Ivanyuk to fictitiously marry Sudareva. She even divorced her real husband for the sake of the scam. While the indictment only mentions 2 victims, both of whom are said to be still serving in the army, Rakos claims that there were more. They were allegedly personally zeroed out by Polishchuk shooting them in the head. This is, however, unconfirmed. The case is not the first time that Russian black widows have been accused of victimizing soldiers to obtain their benefits. In one case from 2024, an ex-convict from Crimea claimed to have been forced to enlist in the army by 2 corrupt police officers. They were said to have made him marry a woman, probably a relative of one of them, in order to obtain his death benefits, as well as having confiscated his enlistment bonus. So this kind of stuff seems to be fairly widespread. One corruption or another. And talking of corruption, I don't even remember the former Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov. He's a guy when there was a sort of mini purge of people at the top that didn't go as far as Shoigu or Gerasimov, but just under that sort of post Prigozhin, people getting cleared out under the, well, I think there probably was real corruption, right? But I think everyone's corrupt. And what the FSB do is they've got enough evidence to be able to arrest anyone because they're all corrupt, but they allow that corruption to take place until they need to get rid of them. And then they go, oh, we're arresting you on corruption. And look, here's all the evidence. And yeah, it is corruption. But actually, you've been allowed to do that for some time until it's useful. Okay, so former Russian Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov may be facing even more fraud charges after it was discovered that land that he had allocated for the construction of a military sports facility was used to construct a luxury chalet built for free by a friendly constructor. Timur Ivanov, a protege of former Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. So this is when people are thinking, oh, Shoigu could be on the end of something soon. Served as a deputy defense minister from 2016 until his arrest in April 2024 for accepting bribes, quote, on a particularly large scale in relation to Russian Ministry of Defense construction projects. Telegram channel reports that in May 2020, Ivanov transferred a 200,000 square meter plot of land on Russky Island, south of Vladivostok, to the Federal State Autonomous Institution, Property Management of Special Projects. It was ostensibly intended for permanent indefinite use as the site of a military sports facility, a training base for a sports shooting complex. The base's purpose was stated to be to, quote, improve the combat training of military personnel. The construction was carried out by the facilities management company 000 or 000 PKB Paris free of charge under a donation agreement. However, instead of the planned sports and shooting complex, a luxury seaside chalet was built instead. According to the channel, it's now being determined whether the chalet was intended for Ivanov himself or someone even higher up. Well, who is even higher up? Sergei Shoigu. Okay, so there you go. This is the sort of stuff that appears to take place not infrequently. Okay, a court in Rostov-on-Don has sentenced 23 Azov soldiers to prison terms ranging from 13 to 23 years. This is unsurprising but sad. The Azov soldiers are seen as the most hated in Russia, and they are much more likely to receive more horrible sentencing and conditions while they are prisoners of war. In fact, they're kind of not seen as prisoners of war, really. I think they're seen more as kind of terrorists. Okay, hashtag Russia is collapsing. Another aviation problem. So this one's doing the round at the moment. This is an AN-12. Wow. That had an issue with its landing gear, skid along the runway, and came to something of an abrupt halt in Novy Urengoy in the northeast of Russia, about 3,000 kilometers from Moscow. Pretty impressive skid there and crash of that pretty large plane. But yeah, so more aviation. I mean, I don't always report aviation stuff to you. There's stuff happening all the time. Okay, moving on to sort of peace negotiations and whatnot. Russia and Ukraine may choose, according to Bloomberg, both sides may choose to continue fighting rather than rush a settlement. Both sides see partial ceasefires as possible, but view prolonged war as less risky than a bad deal. Neither side wants a bad deal, so they're more on the side of continuing the war. Phillips O'Brien says of the arrangements from last night, pretty sure what we've seen today is Trump and Putin acting as allies to betray Ukraine and isolate Europe. What seems to have happened is this. The US, and by the way, Trump has now in his latest speech is slagging off Europe, really blaming Europe for all sorts of stuff, for their national debt and everything. Just honestly, Trump is now going proper against Europe. Anyway, what seems to have happened is this. One, the US got Ukraine to agree a Black Sea ceasefire on the idea that if Russia broke it, the US would put more sanctions on Russia. Two, Trump then turned around and agreed sanctions relief with Russia as part of the Black Sea ceasefire, which Ukraine would not have known, I imagine. Ukraine is now in a box. If it rejects the US deal with Russia, the US can say Ukraine is the bad guy and end all the sanctions. And that's kind of what I talked about last night. 4, Ukraine keeps to the deal. Russia gets an important relief and a significant advantage it did not have. So these huge sanctions reliefs that they are seeking. 5, only European states can help Ukraine now, but they need to be active and fast. And indeed, people are reporting this fairly negatively. Here's an analysis. This looks like the typeface of The Guardian, but not 100% sure. And now this is a good, accurate headline, says Maria Popova. Headline is, Ukraine ceasefire deal looks like a Russian wish list tied with a US bow. And I think that pretty much sums it up in a very pithy sentence there. It's a Russian wish list tied with a US bow. Now, Trump's come out and said, if Russia is stalling on a ceasefire deal, and that's something that seems to be happening, So we have Trump saying that when asked if Russia is stalling on a ceasefire deal, quote, "I don't know. I mean, I'll let you know at some point, but I think Russia wants it to end, but maybe they're stalling. I've been doing this for years, I don't want to sign a contract," so on and so forth. So there are two things to note here. One is good and one is very bad. The good is that Donald Trump is now recognizing that Russia is using stalling tactics, which is to say that they're not playing fair with this and they are the ones that are dragging this. Ukraine has said, right, unconditional ceasefire, yeah, we're game for that. Russia's saying, okay, we'll have a ceasefire. And then they say, oh, no, we want these conditions attached. Oh, no, we want to move the goalpost to here. And Trump is going, right, these guys are stalling. So that's the good news is that he recognizes that. The very bad news is he's justifying it. So that part at the end is super important. As I always say, concentrate on the little things. If someone is saying they're stalling, but that's something I used to do, so, fair play, then, okay, you're just justifying them stalling. In other words, you're not going to come down on them for stalling. You're fine with them stalling because you used to do that with contracts in your business world, in business life. Yeah, not cool. Now, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, said there's talk of Nord Stream. Lavrov eyes a Russia-US energy cooperation, says a Kyiv Independent. Quote, there is talk about Nord Stream. It will probably be interesting if the Americans use their influence on Europe and force it not to give up Russian gas. So you can see the alignment here. You've got Russia and the US trying to force, again, we've heard the US attacking Europe, and again, Trump slagged off Europe last night. How are they going to force Europe to capitulate to Russia and US? Are these two forces that are squeezing Europe from either side? They're aligned. The US and Russia appear to be completely aligned. I mean, that's how I'd read what Lavrov is saying. Russia is negotiating with the US on a resumption of gas supplies to Europe via the Nord Stream gas pipelines, says Lavrov. Goodness. Right, this is not to do with the Ukraine war, but just be warned. This was news that was coming out yesterday. I was keeping an eye on this. I'm behind showing you my geopolitics video. One thing I was going to show you is this video of an underground military base in Iran. Huge complex with loads of equipment. And I wondered why. At the time, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But now I'm thinking, I'm connected to this. I wonder why they showed that. Are the Iranians getting ready for a big strike on Iran? Now we're hearing that 7 stealth bombers have arrived at Diego Garcia. So these are islands that allow them to, strike at certain places around the world. So a secret move of 7 stealth bombers to Diego Garcia can only mean two things. One of two things. An incredible, massive, insanely expensive exercise. So either they're training, but then you wouldn't be moving that many, like that's just crazy expensive. Or Trump is going to strike Iran's ballistic missile city. These moves spell war. So, a couple of things, just to finish off the video. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens. I think Trump wants to be really ballsy and be really strong against certain people, not Russia, but happily against Iran. Lots of the people ideologically around him are proper anti-Iran. And I could see him do that. If it doesn't result in World War III, I don't mean to laugh. If it doesn't result in World War III, that could also be a very clever distraction from domestic things going on in the United States. Doge being increasingly unpopular, the signal catastrophe, and all these scandals and stuff that's happening and tanking polls for Elon Musk and actually for Trump. His polling is going down, and the economy looking to struggle with slowdowns and inflation and tariffs. You start having a war. I mean, 1982, Margaret Thatcher did this war in not that she started that war, but a war in the Falkland Islands saved her prime ministership, right? She was tanking in the polls and then rally around a flag, bish bash bosh, your polls go up and you win the election. Well, Trump is struggling, arguably, although amongst his base, really still popular, but actually independents and other people elsewhere, not popular at all. Something like this could be a distraction. So just watch out for that. There could be some huge strikes on Iran coming. And I'm going to leave you with something positive. So storks, if you don't know, are something of a national icon in terms of Ukraine. Ukraine's most watched storks, so this is a pair of storks, return to their nests in Lelyaki, a symbol of life, resilience, and hope. So I'm going to leave you with this. So that is the male. So I'm going to actually start that again because music, I might get in trouble with that. So here we have the Ukrainian stork Hrustko returning to his home for the 8th time. And then he cleans his nest, waiting for his beloved Odarka. And then, well, after it's all cleaned and he's done some waiting, she does actually return. You can witness a moment when they were finally reunited. They do this kind of neck singing thing. And the first broadcast of the bird's return began 3 years ago. Since then, thousands have watched the long-awaited reunion of the storks after their winter apart. Absolutely fabulous to see that. So some positives there for you and some happy times, hopefully, for these storks as they celebrate seeing each other again after so long. Thank you for stalking around here. I appreciate that. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.